Hi there, welcome to the garden. My purple sweet potatoes back there, they're getting unruly. And my zucchino rampicantes over on the other side, they're watching and they're getting some ideas. So I need to get a trellis up ASAP. My purple sweet potatoes behind me, they're actually quite pretty right now and they're very healthy. But if any of you have actually grown sweet potatoes yourselves, you know that it doesn't take long for them to turn into a viney jungle. If I let that happen, this door behind me is going to be off limits, and that's my access to the garden upstairs, so we can't let that happen. You're probably wondering why I would put the sweet potatoes in front of the door if I knew that it was going to be an issue later. There's two reasons for that. The first one is that the goal of the garden is just as much aesthetic as it is about growing food. I really want that lush jungle look for my balcony, and I really like to be able to see it from inside my apartment, my living room. And this location right here I can see directly from my couch, and I love that. And because the sweet potatoes are so healthy and they're so easy to grow, this spot will always make it so that I can see my jungle from inside the house. Number two, I tried moving the sweet potatoes last year. First I moved them back where the zucchino rampicante are, and they just did not like the direct sunlight. They dried up quick. Even when I kept them watered, they dried up. Once I realized they weren't liking the direct sunlight, I moved them back into the corner. But being out of the way like that where I couldn't see them, I just didn't keep up with the watering. So they died. Totally my fault. Once they died, they ended up being a hotel for the rats that came and ate all my eggplants. So that was double whammy right there. So this year, I'm just going to try and put in the work to keep my view pretty and my sweet potatoes happy. Over here is my zucchino rampicante, also called a tromboncino squash. It's got a few other names too. If you've ever grown a zucchini, you know how big those plants can get. Well, this fruit gets over a foot longer than your average zucchini, so you can only imagine what the whole plant is going to do. Just check out these leaves for an idea. The plan here is to form a wall along the back of that rail. Catch all the leftover sunlight that isn't blocked by the rest of the garden. This is the northernmost wall of the balcony, so it shouldn't block out the sunlight for any of the other plants. My Trinidad perfume here might have some problems with the plan. I'm gonna have to decide which of these two plants is more important to me. So far, the two main ideas are either to prune this stalk off of the Trinidad perfume and let all three of the zucchino rampicante plants grow freely, or to have this plant over here on the zucchino rampicante grow up here and then trim off the lower leaves so that the Trinidad perfume can grow freely. I have not decided. I still probably have at least 2 weeks before I have to think about that. These panels here are going to be the body of our trellises. They're called remesh panels and they're designed to reinforce concrete. I wanted to use cattle panels like all the other YouTube videos and internet articles, but for some reason finding fences for cows in suburban Orange County is actually kind of hard. To stiffen up the panels, my plan is to weave these cheap planks in and out of the mesh and then staple them up at the top. It should provide a pretty good amount of rigidity for when we've got nearly 30 pounds of squash hanging from our trellis. The trellis for the rampicante is going to have the balcony railing for support, but the sweet potatoes, they're surrounded by stucco walls, so it's going to take a little more effort. My plan is to put a nice 90-degree bend in the mesh so that it will have some rigidity and we can just zip tie it straight to the container that the sweet potatoes are growing in. My plan is to use this sheet of plywood as a die to bend my sheet of mesh. I'm hoping that the full length of plywood being the same length as the mesh will give me a nice clean bend that'll look really good for a long time. The benefit of having used cattle panels over this remesh is that the cattle panels are galvanized, just like a chain link fence, so they won't rust. These cattle panels, they will rust eventually, especially since I live like a mile from the beach. Salty air, they're not going to last long. That might work great for some people. It'll probably even add some decor to some gardens. But as you might have noticed from my whitewashed kitchen, I like things nice and neat and tidy. So we're going to blast these with a quick coat of spray paint before we start assembling them. Paint's not pretty, but it's dry, so now we're going to try and weave those planks through the mesh. The weaving of the first trellis is done, as you can see. That was a lot harder than I expected it to be, which is actually a good thing because it's going to make it pretty darn sturdy. The weaving is done on both trellises. It got a little bit easier as I went. I figured out what I was doing and how to slide them through easier. If you bend the mesh before you push it through, then it's not such a struggle. It's just not quite as secure. But our next step is to secure the mesh to the wood, so it works out in the long run. A staple would probably be the best tool for this job, but I'm just using stuff that I have around, so I'm just going to use a nail, and then I'm just going to bend it over after I've nailed it in. It should work just fine. You may have noticed this extra bit of wood sticking out below the trellis. This is to raise the entire trellis. The container for the sweet potatoes and for the zucchino rampicante, it doesn't start until about here. Imagine this hand is the ground. So there's no reason to have trellis way down here. It's not going to do anything. We tried to raise the mesh up a little bit higher on the zucchino rampicante trellis because it doesn't have a roof. There's no ceiling or building above it. But this one, the sweet potato trellis, it has an 8-foot height limitation, so this is actually going to work perfectly. Now that our trellises are all put together and prettied up, it's just time to put them in place. The zucchino rampicante back there, it's just going to get zip tied to the railing. Super simple. The zip ties are on there. There's 4 of them. Just gotta cut off the tails and we'll be done. It's not quite as strong as I'd hoped, so I'm gonna have to brainstorm some better ideas just in case the wind gives it troubles down the line. But overall, I think I am pretty happy with it. Over here is going to be a little bit more tricky because it's all stucco, So we're going to have to fasten the trellis directly to the container and just drill some holes and zip tie to that. Since it's not holding fruit, I'm pretty confident that it'll be strong enough. I did have to cut some holes in the trellis for the light up there. At some point the vines are going to want to grow over the light. I don't have a solution for that, but it's not going to be an issue for probably a few more months, so that is a problem for a few more months. All I did for the sweet potato trellis is drilled 2 holes in the side of the container and just put my zip tie through that. I did the same thing over on this side. 2 zip ties does not seem like a lot, but since this area is next to the building and protected from the wind significantly, I'm confident that it should be okay. The worst problem will be that it seems like it might have some rattling issues, which might get kind of annoying since I can see it from the couch. I'll do a follow-up later and let you guys know how the trellises worked out. If you like this video, you found something useful in it, I hope you give me a thumbs up. And if you've got any ideas for how to make these better, or different materials to use, or anything about making trellises for your balcony garden, please leave a comment. If you liked the video and you'd like to see more, please hit the subscribe button. I hope to see you next time upstairs in the garden.